Hello, everybody. Welcome to my YouTube channel. I'm going to be doing a live painting demo tonight, and hopefully, I won't have any of the technical difficulties that I've had on and off for the last few videos. The one last week, the sound started to loop in the middle of the video and started just on a 3 second loop for 45 minutes while I was talking. I didn't realize that no one could uh, hear me anymore. They were just hearing the sound loop. And but so tonight we're going to be working on this, working from a photo of a young woman from Sydney, Australia. Her name is Linie. She also has an Instagram account. I did get her photo actually off of Sketchy, where I've gotten most of my photos, and I've started the initial drawing as accurately as I could in about 20 minutes on Instagram Live with my followers there watching me. And now I'm going to be doing the painting portion of this on this channel on YouTube. So, welcome. Let me know if you're here watching. Let me know where you're tuning in from. And if you came over from Instagram, I'd like to know that too. And please, please, please ask me questions as I am painting. Otherwise, I will just um, start blathering on, rambling on aimlessly, talking about various things, and it may be things that you do or don't want to know about. Um, I actually am a little bit short of paint here, and some of the paint has dried on the palette a little bit, so I'm going to scrape that off. I did try to angle the camera so that you guys can um, see the palette also as I'm painting. It means that I'm not quite as close to the painting itself, or at least the camera isn't, but you can see a little bit more what I'm doing in terms of color mixing. I'll call out some of the colors as I draw from them so you have an idea, but some of these color mixing skills just um, really just come from lots of practice trying to mix different colors because some of these colors can be so intense that you just add little bits of the color to get it to shift in the direction that you want, and so you only learn that from trying adding more or less of each color as you go. Okay, so I'm all out of yellow, so I want to get some of that on my palette. And um, just to let you know a little bit, Linie is dressed up as a cosplay character. Um, I'm trying to remember all of the name. It's the character is Fukawa, and I don't remember the name of the show that it's from, but it's a young schoolgirl with braids in a school uniform, and then she also attacks people with a scissors. Um, and she has some kind of long tongue that also shoots out at people too. So interesting. Um, I've also played around in Photoshop. She's just in a sweater um, in this photo, and I played around with it so that I've also added in Photoshop the schoolgirl uniform. If I want to decide to add that too, you can weigh in and tell me whether you um, like the photo just the way it is, or you'd like to see it pushed more towards the cosplay character. Anyway, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. Um, trying to find my brushes. I have a few um, favorite brushes here that I've been working with the last week or two. There's I always have trouble with the detail brush, and I have this old filbert brush that I've worn down to a nub. I don't know if you can really see it, but because it's wormed down, it's almost like it's been sharpened into a point. So that gives me a little bit of extra room to do detail. And oh, just one thing as I'm starting off here, if anyone can let me know how the sound quality is. I do have a sort of a makeshift microphone plugged into my camera now. The first several live demos, first 10 or so, I didn't really have a microphone, so I was trying to talk into the phone, and then every time I moved away from the phone, no one could hear me. So just send me a little text saying sounds great or horrible, or the mic's too close to your mouth and it just sounds all um, spittily, if that's the right word. Okay, so I'm gonna mix up a little bit of the half tone, get my palette knife in here and just get some of the color out on here. I need to get a lot more white down here. I've started to change some of the colors on my palette. I'm um, I've been using titanium white for a long time, and now I've just ordered some radiant white. This is a Gamblin artist color. Radiant white is exactly the same as a titanium white, but instead of linseed oil, it uses safflower oil, and safflower oil is has a higher clarity than linseed oil. Linseed oil has is a little bit yellow, and so by using a binder with higher clarity, it does have an overall brighter, cooler sense to it. So it's just that allows me to decide how much yellow I want if I want to add yellow as opposed to having it already part of the white. It's pretty subtle. I haven't really noticed a strong difference yet, but I am um, trying this color out. Let me get Linie up larger here so I can jump in with some of the color. So she doesn't have a whole lot of yellow. The the light on her face is pretty cool, and her flesh tones seem pretty cool. So I'm gonna try to mix away a little bit of that yellow and then work it in later. Um, I don't know if the glasses that she has on actually has lenses on it. Looks like there's a little bit of reflection here, but they may not be actual lenses. I can see why I've been having you have to forgive me, so much problem thinning out the paint because I don't actually have any of the thinner um, in my brush holder. So I was like, whoa, that this paint's really sticky today. I can't seem to get it to move, and that's because I wasn't actually adding any thinner. Okay, that's better. Um, so I'm just gonna go in, paint in around the eye. Okay, so just gonna look real quick. Audio and video, great for me. Hello from Canada, that's Sharon. Um, where is the photo reference on Sketchy? Her name on Sketchy is Linie. Um, trying to remember her last name. It's like Linie Marson or something like that. Um, I can put a link in the bio, but if you start off with Linie, you might be able to find her. Um, This one was posted. I can tell you exactly when it was posted. I believe it was January 1st of this year. So you kind of have to, don't know if you can really go back into the reference that far. Um, but just getting some paint down. I can see that the tones here are going to be much lighter. I'm just trying to get a little bit of the paint down. I just need more just pure red. I have a quinacridone red, which is a very cool red, and then I have a naphthol red, but mixed with this white will also be pretty cool. And get some into the nose. I'm just covering over a lot of my drawing here. And then it gets, the painting gets a little bit darker and redder in towards her forehead. So I can go ahead and approximate that. Just trying to work a little bit quickly here because just limited by time. Okay, let me see. Jennifer, hi, came over from Instagram. That's great. Sharon says sounds good. Marion says sounds good. Trixie, howdy. Trixie, you can tell me where you're watching from. That would be great. Um, Marion just says hi, thank you. Okay. Oh, she must have found it then. Um, I did. If you came on Instagram, people who let me know beforehand, I did send them the full photo reference, um, and there might be at least a couple people painting along with us tonight. I try to encourage that and just to get everyone painting. It's kind of a group activity here. Builds community. All right, and then I just want to get this a little bit of a darker value at the bottom of the nose. The light is coming a little bit from our left. Let's see. Get get the right color on the side of the nose. I almost have to come in with white to overcome how dark I went initially on the nose. And some of these value changes are very subtle here in the face. Let's just put down a lot of white right here just to get in the right value range. Good. Okay. And then the lips, I'm going to use more of the naphtha red because they're kind of on the warm side. Let's get a little bit of the thinner down. Her bottom lip is warmer and lighter than her upper lip. So I'm just going to get a whole lot of orange in that too. Orange and white. Then I can come in later with trying to get that color a little more exact. Okay, and then just about the only shadow in her face is her jawline, which has a lot of red in it. So just about pure alizarin permanent around that jawline. Just adjust the line of her lips a little bit. I'm going to see if I can get a little bit of this paint off because I'm just working against myself. It's so thick there. Great. Okay. And okay, Marion says she's from Bay St. Louis. Um, Storm is headed to us. This will um, keep my mind off of it for a few. What state is that in? Is it? Are you talking about St. Louis, Missouri, or you're somewhere else? You can let me know. I know there's a little bit of a time delay here, so I'll ask a question, and then 3 minutes later you'll hear it, and then um, 2 minutes later I'll see your response. So um, just one of those technology things. Okay, and then in the neck almost goes to pure white down here, and you see the light is hitting very hard. So I really have this area is really the spot of the light, and then it moves darker as it moves away from that area. So I want to pay attention to that as I'm painting, just to maintain that gradation of light, and that will really help create that a little bit sense of drama. So real quickly about my palette, I use something called a high key palette. Each color in my palette is the highest um, chroma or the highest intensity of color that um, that I can get, and then that allows me to be able to hit any just about any color that I want to, and then I can go duller, less intense by mixing complements together or mixing gray, black and white together with the color to neutralize it. Um, but generally, just as you paint wet into wet, if you're painting a lot of different colors together, it does tend to neutralize. And then where you want pure color, then you have to be a little bit more careful about not contaminating your mixture on the palette with other colors. Trying to get this a little bit of phthalo blue for the color in the whites of her eyes is a bluish color, but it's leaning a little bit warm, a little bit towards the green, I want to say, which is actually a little bit cooler. Um, but if I do it right, if I get the right value down there and get a little bit of the value change as I paint in the rest of the colors of her eye, then it will start to feel a little bit more photographic and dimensional. Okay. And at some point, I may pull out my ruler and remeasure things because I do have a tendency to shift things around um, as I'm defining them. I'll move an edge over without realizing it, and before you know it, um, an eye or an ear is moved over an inch or so. Yeah, actually that much sometimes. And get her lashes, and then there's lots of shadows here on the far side of her eye, and a pretty strong highlight that's coming in. That's fairly cool right here, almost purple. Um, oh, Mississippi, thank you. St. Louis, Bay St. Louis, Mississippi, I guess. Um, that's one of the wonders of technology is that we can all be sitting down together while some of us work on their own paintings and I'm working on my painting, and we're essentially all over the world. Um, I'm not sure whether if Linie figured out when I was doing this painting. It's about a 12-hour time difference in Sydney. I think it's 12 hours. I'm not sure. Maybe it's a little more or less, but definitely morning there. So while I was figuring out which painting I was painting and communicating to people on my channel about it, um, and also tagging her in some of those communications, she might have figured out um, when I was doing this. There was someone who asked a question about her cosplay costume, and she did respond inside the post, so I know that she's definitely um, aware that I was selecting, or I had her photo as one of the ones that we were choosing from. Great. I'm just gonna. Oh, I have a coworker, Angela, who's here tonight. Hey, she says. Hey, saying back. Trixie. Oh, thank you. She says your live streams have helped a lot with me a lot with painting. Oh, you're welcome. That's great. That's why I do these. Um, can I speak about brushes? I never know what brushes to use. Okay, so essentially, there's two kind of categories of brush hairs. There's synthetics, and then there's natural hair brushes. And sometimes there's actually brushes that are a combination of the two. But even between those two categories, there's almost a crossover because there tends to be softer brushes and stiffer brushes. And the stiffer brushes will be bristles made out of pig hair, and those brushes um, I tend to use to how to explain it. I tend to use it to get certain effects of the with the paint. If I'm really painting wet into wet, then the stiffer brushes kind of get into the lower layers of paint as I'm painting, and so it kind of um, disturbs the paint that's down already. Is the best way to put it. Whereas the softer brushes, you can kind of paint right, especially if you have a light touch, you can paint right on top of the paint that's already down. And so I know that a lot of artists start off with can start off with the softer brushes and then get into um, the stiffer brushes. I tend to work back and forth. The the stiffer brushes are nice in a way because they have a little more spring to them, and then you can feel the hairs of the brush on the board, and that really helps let you know where you are in terms of the surface, especially if your eyesight starts to go. It really being able to touch the surface of the canvas, or in my case a panel, and then move the paint around is that tactile experience is really helpful, and is kind of a, an how do you say it, an extra sensory perception that allows you um, to have a little more control in the painting. And so so there's the softness or the type of bristles, stiffness or softness. Synthetic brushes tend to be less expensive, so I tend to, because I'm a cheap guy, I tend to use them a lot. The um, some of the well, except for bristle because it's pig hair and it's readily abundant. Depending on the type of bristle, can be fairly inexpensive also. But when you get into the sable brushes, were actually, from sable, like sable coats, the brushes can start to get quite expensive, and and depending on the brush maker too, there's different quality of brush makers, can get very expensive. But also, so within the different stiffnesses of brush, there's also the brush shapes. So you can have a filbert brush, or a flat, or a bright, or a round. Detail brushes tend to be rounds, so sort of um, smaller versions of round brushes. So you can have a zero or a triple zero um, round brush, and that will be your detail brush. And then you can have things like rigger brushes, which are very long for doing long straight lines. Um, Almost, I think they're rigger like the rigs on sailboats, so you can kind of make those long sweeping thin lines with those brushes, especially if you've built up the ability to control the brush. Then you can come in with a long, thin, straight line across your canvas or panel, especially if you don't have too much wet paint already down. It gets a little bit hard to control and to get thinner lines when you have a lot of wet paint that you're painting on top of. So um, staging and planning out the painting. Sometimes you have areas where let's say you have a horizon line that's going in one direction, and then you have the the lines, um, the ropes, or what I'm trying to think of the term, the the lines on a sailboat, and those if those are breaking, or maybe it could be a tree line that's breaking the horizon line. And so then need to plan out the layers so that you're not fighting against it. Even simple things like eyelashes I tend to put in last, because it's very hard to paint around each eyelash if you put them down first. So you do have to be a little bit of strategic about when you start to put in um, certain elements into the painting. I don't know if I answered that question or not, but so when I went to art school, the big thing there was filbert brushes because everyone wanted to paint like John Singer Sargent, and you can get sort of the effects of his brushwork because that's you can tell from the shape of a lot of his strokes that that's what he used a lot. I don't think he only used filbert brushes, but I think that overall, where you can see a lot of the brushwork, he was using filbert. So filbert bristle brushes to get kind of those wet on wet effects. Um, but you can get wet on wet effects, and you get kind of certain type of brushwork with different brushes. If I think about the work of Carol Marine, um, who does a lot of lovely still lives, and the shapes in her still lives have almost a chiseled look, it's clear that she's using a um, either a flat or a bright um, shape brush to get a lot of that brushwork in. It's just evident in the shape of the brushstrokes in her work that that chiselly look is comes from a certain shape of brush. And so then you have to think about what kind of look do you want in the painting, and what kind of brushes are going to help you achieve that. Let me just make sure that the sound's not cutting out on me. Um, do I do portraits for a living? That's what Trixie asked. I am a front end web developer. That's my full time job. I've done in the past a lot of graphic design. I've done some illustration work. I've done graphic illustration, painted illustration, a mixture of freelancing, doing different things. But right now, um, I do front end web development work full time, and I am doing a lot of painting, as you can see from my videos and from my Instagram page. That I'm doing um, one, two, sometimes three portrait studies or paintings a week, and those are a lot of those. Excuse me, are to build up my skills. This comes from doing it a lot frequently, trying out different things, but just the practice of doing it a lot does help me build up the skills and the confidence. And I do have been doing portrait commissions more lately as I get more exposure from being on YouTube and Instagram. Then people are able to find me and see my work. And so I've been doing maybe one or two commissions a month. Um, my pricing structure is such that I am can't make a full-time living doing portraiture work, but eventually I think if I get to start to do more of it and I can charge a little bit more, then I might think about doing that full time. But I'm not even close to that, so it's not really a question right now. But it is considering it as my retirement career. So and it seems like since I work primarily from photos, that I can do that from anywhere in the world. And so it may be just that plan is that just continually building up my clientele so that I can do portraiture from wherever. Let me get the shape of this nose. Okay, I I do have a particular kind of, I guess, style, even though I try to be somewhat faithful to the photographs that I paint from. I think that as I start to look back at all the paintings that I've done, there is a tendency to um, push. color a little bit, trying to make strong color, and I do like when um, the focus of the painting is rather close, and the lens, there's a little bit of lens distortion that sort of emphasizes the closeness of the photo. I do work from a lot of selfies, which tend to have a lot of distortion in them. And so that overall affects the look of my work. Um, okay, Marion says, thank you. I love that right now you haven't changed to brush. Yeah, I'm just, this is a fairly large brush. I want to say it's a number 8 flat. Um, yeah, that's a flat. And I try to avoid doing the whole painting with a small brush. Sometimes I'll grab a hold of a small brush just to do a little bit of detail, and then um, I forget to put it down and grab my larger brush, get the silhouette of the hand in here and the sweater. Okay, so far I'm not painting the costume. I'm just coming in with the sweater, which is okay. Um, I did worry about doing this painting because it's so much of uh, a caricature, almost stereotyped, and I didn't wasn't sure if I felt completely comfortable with that. I just threw it up with the other photos, and people did respond to it, so I decided that that was fine. Um, okay, just getting in the hand, the sense of the hand there. And I just want to get darker, redder on the cheeks there, inside the glasses and around the eyes. Really not digging into too much detail yet, just trying to get general forms working. I think it's going to be helpful to throw in a background color. So I have this kind of light blue. It's very purpley right now, but I can come in, get a little bit of the phthalo emerald in there, which is sort of a greenish blue, very intense color. Um, but it's a little bit muted here because I have a lot of other colors mixed in there. And have a phthalo blue too. So these are a couple steps away from each other in terms of hue. But mixtures of the two, I can almost get any greenish blue tint out of them. Okay, and just correct kind of the shapes around the nose a little bit. Okay, Mary says, wow, it looks really beautiful. Trixie, I always end up ditching my paintings before I finish them because I don't like how it's turning out. Um, well, then you got nothing left to lose by continuing to work on them. But sometimes I will um, kind of lose where I am in the middle of the painting and then really struggle to get it back. Um, I found that if I don't worry about repainting elements in the painting, that I can get it to work. It's when I really try to hold on to something that it may be an element that looks really good, but it's just like slightly in the wrong place, and I don't. I can see it's wrong. If I go back and measure, I can tell that it's not quite right, and just continuing to hold on to those things. I just actually my last painting, the eyes were slightly a kilter, but I liked the way the eyes were painted. But in the end, you just get really good at painting eyes if you just keep on repainting them if you need to. It's not that hard. I can think I can paint an eye in just about a minute or two. So just leaving it in the wrong place no longer really works. Just just starting to get really good at repainting things if I need to. Okay, so got kind of all the area of the face painted in. I want to get sort of the dark of the hair, so it helps me judge the values a little bit better. I didn't only change the white. I now have started painting with a different black um, than I was using before. And actually, I have both blacks here. I'm just randomly grabbing from one or the other. I'm not sure it really makes a huge difference if I'm just trying to put in the black of the hair. It's more when you start to mix colors that these different blacks start to show their different properties. So I've for a long time been using ivory black. It's a very cool black and allows me to get a very dark, rich dark color used used in pure form. And um, and I've just switched. I listened to Robert Gamblin and a couple of interviews talk about the qualities of the different blacks, and he talked a lot about um, chromatic black, and that's the black that I'm using right here. And chromatic black is actually a mixture of phthalo green and quinacridone red. They're both very intense, transparent colors, but they're the exact opposite ends of the color wheel. And because of that, then they neutralize each other perfectly. And so there is actually no black at all in the color. They're just highly transparent colors mixed together to create something that just looks like a pure black. The nice thing about this black, though, is that it doesn't. When you mix ivory black with some yellows and oranges, it tends to shift them green. There's just it's such a cool black that um, it creates an influence where it does shift the hue. And I haven't had this chromatic black for long enough, but theoretically it shouldn't. It should be a balanced black where it won't shift the hue quite as much. I'm going to get a little bit of the red that's in the braids here, if I can quite get them in the right place. The sense of these too, and I have to go a little bit lighter before those start to read. Sometimes you can just get the sense of something very quickly. You don't have to put down a lot of strokes or overwork it. You just want to give the viewer, a little bit of information so that there's just enough sense of what's going on there. And sometimes that's the most effective bit of painting, that it's so just lightly indicated that it really strikes a balance between it being pure paint and describing whatever it is. And a lot of times that's just the light touch that really gets that to work. Okay, so you can kind of get a sense, you already get a sense of the braids there. And don't have to go too crazy over that. And then I'm going to get some of this background color in here working around those braids, not being too delicate at all with the background. And want to hold on to some of that tur- sort of warmish blue, a little gray in the background. Okay, so I just want to make sure that this part of the background and the other side are reading partly as this having sharing the space essentially look like they're part of the same thing. Okay. Um, okay. Marion says, I think there is always the ugly stage, then the magic, like a magic it pops. Trixie, I'm not very good at the magic part. Um, Marion says, smile, sunshine. Um, Shanks, 37, I recognize you from Instagram. I usually have to threaten myself that I will, no matter what, finish and not give up. Okay. Um, I haven't had to quite threaten myself yet, so um, just there was a while before recently. I've been sort of painting very consistently, head studies for the last 2 years. And because of that consistent pursuit and just sort of being dogged about getting past certain hurdles that were holding my work back, that my work has improved a lot, so that I can, um, I guess, kind of feel like I can be successful more consistently. But there were a period of 2 or 3 years where I was doing portraits and head studies, and I would just not be able to do what I felt like was a successful attempt, and I would paint the same painting over and over and over again, and it would just fall flat, continually fall flat, and I couldn't figure out what I was doing wrong. And then what I finally figured out, it was a combination of a lot of different things that were negatively impacting my work. It was the lighting that I was working under. It was the um, it was some poorly drawn aspects of it that I just needed to do more. It was the surface that I was working on that I didn't have a whole lot of control over the values and the colors. And so, and I also wasn't painting slow enough. I didn't realize this. I started watching a lot of painting videos, and from some artists that I assumed that they painted very quickly. And it looks like I'm painting kind of quickly right now, but only because I'm just sort of blocking things in. But what I realized is when I watched their videos, just how slowly they move the brush and how deliberately they put down um, the marks that I thought were put down very quickly. They were actually moving quite slowly, and and had a certain tempo to the work. And then um, then I as I so started to do that more often, just started to really move more slowly as I needed to have a little bit more precision. That made a huge difference. I realized that you can't get a certain level of precision if you're just attacking the panel or the canvas. You really just have to slow down to get these very subtle color and value changes. Um, I'm not at the stage of the painting right now where I am doing that, so it may be a little bit deceiving. That um, let's see, hold on. I want to get that measurement right. Um, I know I've painted the ear too wide, but also the amount of hair that she has sticking out behind her here, her ear looks too wide. So let me, if I can adjust that, cut it a little bit with the background, something like this. Let me see. The braid comes in straight, then down. Okay. So something like that, then the hair comes up a little more quickly. Okay, that's great. Um, let me see. Um, love the one you said made you cry. Oh, okay. I know which one you're talking about from my video. Um, yeah. So I'm sort of like I want to talk a little bit about the business of portrait painting, or just painting in general, because so much is changing so quickly that first of all, the only way that you used to be able to sell work was either by taking your paintings to the street and through selling through art fairs, or um, on the streets of New York, or something like that, kind of more informally, or you had the gallery system. And that's the way it had been for a couple hundred years. And then something came along called the internet and even the smartphones. And now um, it is much easier to get your work in front of the public. Easier in a sense because you can they can see your work directly. What's hard is that um, there's so many artists that are online and trying to do the same thing, trying to reach the same audiences, um, that is a little bit of a struggle. But you no longer have to show your work through a gallery. In fact, a lot of galleries have been having problems because people are more interested in looking for paintings themselves that they want to buy just online, and not going through a gallery, or maybe through a gallery but also online looking at the work that they have available. And so this has really changed the marketplace. And so I've personally been exploring selling my work through social media, um, and some advertising through social media, but mostly building my presence on a few different social media platforms. And this also at the same time of just really improving the quality of my work, so that um, that kind of creates a selling point too. I've needed some sort of shopping cart online because until recently I was sort of negotiating with people through direct message, and saying my prices, or um, negotiating a commission, what they wanted me to paint, how much I was going to charge, how it was going to be paid for, sending them an invoice, all that back and forth. And so what I really wanted was an online shopping cart where I could just put my work up and then people could decide whether they wanted to buy it or not. And doing a little bit of research, um, I started to look at Shopify, which is it's kind of a standalone um, shopping cart system that um, you can put your products on, and then you can push it out to different um, social media channels. And and they charge the base sort of package for that is $30 a month, and then they charge you very little actually at the point of sale. And and one thing that I was really interested in is that you could um, make an Instagram post that had a product in it, for example, a painting that you wanted to sell, and then with Shopify you could tag your product in that photo on Instagram or on Facebook, and it would have a little shopping bag icon on it. And then if someone clicked on it, then they could actually just buy the painting right there, um, right through the channel. So on Instagram, for example, right from your post, then they could buy. And I thought that was very powerful. Like, it's almost frictionless. They see the painting, they want to buy it, they click on it, and then there's a whole checkout process right there inside of Instagram. Well, that idea in the end didn't work very well because it's somewhat a new offering from Instagram, and I could never get approved as a viable channel. At first, I just thought that there was some error in my setup, and because Instagram doesn't really have customer service, I was having a really hard time figuring out what was going on. And so in the end, I saw enough other people had this problem of getting approval and asked them, like, did they ever resolve it after several months of trying, and they all said no. So in the end, I decided that because that was the main reason that I was using Shopify was to be able to sell my work um, on Instagram, just directly on Instagram, and that I couldn't in the end do that, I decided to look at other possibilities because I knew it was going to take a long time to develop the market for my work, and I didn't want to be paying $30 every month while I was doing that, um, which could have ended up being, several $100s in charges before anyone ever clicked on any of the shopping carts. So, or any of the sales pages. Let me just check my feed, make sure everything's working. Um, so I'm just checking the sound and the feed. Sorry, because I've had pictures freeze up and the sound loop, and looks like it's working okay right now. So I am going to keep on going on this. So in the end, I decided that even though Etsy kind of is this brand where it's like lots of crafty handmade things that are all individually made, it um, doesn't sound high enough brow um, for a very skilled portrait painter to be showing the work on. But in the end of the day, it is a shopping cart system, and it's its own has its own environment that can also drive traffic. It's kind of a mix between a social media platform and a shopping function or individual shops. So I thought, hey, that might be work well. And one of the big advantages is that they only really charge you when you sell something. So I can have my shop up for a couple years before it really gets traction, and I won't have spent very much money, at least maintaining the shop itself. There is a small fees for listing. It's 20 cents um, to list an item, very nominal, and so your fees basically come in when you make sales. And so the if you price everything right, then the price covers all of your cost involved. And so that's why I ended up moving on to Etsy. And then, but I've been getting portrait commissions basically through Instagram. Just get enough exposure, just growing the size of my channel. And most of the people that are part of my followers, the Etsy community, sorry, the Instagram community, is did I say that right? I've been getting most of my commissions through Instagram. I think I said that right. Um, Most of my followers are other artists. They're not likely to buy my work, but they're more interested in how I paint. So, but they're useful. You guys are useful in the sense that you help grow my channel, that you help me be more visible, that that I try to figure out what it is that you are looking for and keep you engaged by showing up close-ups of my work and talking about my process, and you get a benefit out of that, and that also benefits me in the long run. So I do that as much as I can, and either lately, some of you know this, but I just put up some files to share with other artists that are looking to sell portrait work. It's a way of demonstrating the scale of paintings and the subsequent pricing to potential clients, because it's a really hard thing to communicate over the internet. So it's just a an example of one of my portraits that has different size frames around it. Frames just meaning white boxes, so that and each one says what the inch size is. So I paint at actual size, and so each one of those crops at a different place, and so would help a client understand the size. So anyway, I'm making that file available to whoever DMs me their email address, and and that also helps me start to build my mailing list of artists that are following me. Um, Let me see. Last question. Thoughts on creating form. Um, so form. I think you mean like sense of volume. So a sense of volume is both the underlying drawing, having things placed in the right place, does help create that sense of form, but also the value structure is very important. So if I look at things about the um, something being darker along this edge and moving lighter and then moving darker again, does create that sense of roundness, and I can just exaggerate that a little bit right here. So this helps create that edge that's moving away from us. And then there's this cast shadow along the edge of the nose. Let's see if I can get that in there. And but there's a little bit of moving back towards the dark again, and then in the middle of that cheek is a little bit of light. And so this is going to help sort of sculpt that those forms, and it can be really subtle shifts in value, but the brain is very good at picking up on those cues. And even with the subtlest of value change, you can still get a form to wrap around very strongly. And that's actually one thing that I've learned recently is just trust that subtle changes can do a pretty hefty job. Doesn't have to be a dramatic change in value. It can just be almost imperceivable while you're painting it. But if there's just enough information for the eye to pick up and the brain to process, it can really you can really turn the form quite effectively. Let's get a little more white in here across this part of the face. And then I do have a little bit of a value shift as we get towards the end edge of that cheek. So I'm going to try to get a little bit of that in. And then the neck is shifting a little bit yellow, and it's a good thing I have all this um, paint down here with a bit of yellow in it. And again, don't have a strong enough dark along the edge of the neck, the nape of the neck, that's also helping the form read there. And I think I just have to come up. I made her neck a little bit too skinny, so I need to adjust that a little bit. So fairly dark edge here too along the edge of the jaw. And then right there the neck starts to come down. Okay? And then but right up against that it's pretty light. Okay, let me see. Did you look at daily paintworks to sell your art? So yeah, I did, and I followed pretty closely Carol Marine. She's the one of the founders of that platform. By the time I really started to look at it, there is just so much work on that platform already. I just think it's just a really hard market there to break into. And I just thought that the fees and the structure and everything that um, there's just so much artwork on there that it just kind of made more sense for me to look at Etsy, just because of the fairly low cost. And while it's difficult at first to get your work seen on there, I just felt like I could differentiate my work a lot easier there. Um, and I think on either platform, I could differentiate my work in terms of quality, but I just kind of felt like a little hard to stand out on this platform where there's so many other people doing kind of similar genre of work, um, quality or not. And so I just decided that Etsy was where I wanted to go. And plus, Etsy is just, it's such a robust platform that they have so many programmers that um, are working constantly to improve the user experience. I can't talk about daily paintworks out of experience, but I just kind of just felt like Etsy just has it's just so much has to be more robust. Just has to be. Just I'm not sure that um, I'm sure that that daily paintworks may be working diligently to um, keep their channel platform very strong and up to date, but I just don't know how they would compete um, with the amount of sales and revenue that that Etsy generates and what they have to work with, and plus their incentive to be able to compete against the likes of Amazon or other or eBay or other platforms that are also capable of selling you crafts. Okay, so I want to see if I can get this shadow to start reading in here. So I have to go almost with pure white to start to get that to stand out. Sorry, I got a little bit of hiccups and I'm getting very warm. Just dumped a bunch of cold water on my lap, so that kind of woke me up here. The air conditioner is out in our house, so um, really sweating to death over here. But since I've also done quite a bit of plein air painting in the middle of summer days, I know how to endure painting in very hot weather. That if that's the only thing I got out of plein air painting, it was worth it. Okay, so I'm using these blacks interchangeably. I'm not sure really at this point if I'm really paying attention to the quality or the um, the real differences, the quality difference, or I'm losing my language. The um, the usability difference, the color difference between these two colors. I guess I'm looking for if there's really a functional difference. I do know that the chromatic black is highly transparent, which theoretically should allow you to build up to a very rich black just by keep on putting down layer after layer until you get to, assuming that you're not contaminating it with other colors, that you should be able to get um, about as black a black as you can get. Okay. Um, so Marion says, "Well, thank you so much for everything. Got to pay attention to this storm. Bye, everyone. Enjoy." Maybe you can add a comment later about how it all worked out for you. Um, but just be safe, okay? let's get a little bit of this black, her black sweater in here. She has a blue t-shirt on underneath, so I'm going to make it very close in value, but just get some hints of blue in there. Okay. And I think I might try to leave some of these open brushstroke areas, just leave them a little bit just to show some of the brushwork. And again, putting just a little bit of indication of where the braids are. Just, okay. And I need a little bit of um, the alizarin permanent. Okay. So I'm kind of missing an eyeball here, so let me get going on that. Just trying to get a little bit of indication. I can see that I really need to have it. Um, no, I thought I had it in the wrong place because where these glasses are, but the glasses are actually much further over here. So that is looking about right. Need to get the white of the eye in at the right value so that I can really start to see it. Um, and then I need a little bit of a shelf. The upper edge of this cheek here is kind of missing. It's a really particular color, has kind of a fair amount of colorful pink in there. I want to try to capture that, and then a little bit of darker red on the outside of this cheek. And so some of the exercise here is just really seeing some of those subtle colors and shifts that help get something to read correctly. Get a little bit more white down here on this where the light is hitting more strongly on the chin, and then just correct some of that shape. Okay, so I have the lips aren't looking quite right yet, so I need to reshape these a little bit. So I almost always paint lips with this alizarin permanent. It gives me a very dark, almost black red, and so where two lips come together, it sort of seems like the obvious choice in a lot of cases. Um, that is just too gray, but that's okay. I'm just going to blend that in a little bit. Come in with a little bit of pink, lighter, and a little bit more lighter color to get that form feeling right. So I always say when it looks like you need to adjust a color, um, it's easy to forget that there's two ways to adjust a color. The first one's pretty obvious, is that you change the color that you have down. The other one isn't so obvious, and I think it's easy to forget, is that you can also adjust a color by adjusting the colors around it. Um, and sometimes that's the right choice structurally for the rest of the things in your painting. Something may appear to be not the right color, but it is actually close to where you want it to be, and by changing the colors around it, you're actually improving the whole painting at the same time by getting those other values to be in check. For example, a highlight on the tip of the nose, you may think you have to go lighter and lighter, and you keep on painting it white, and it just doesn't feel light enough. Well, sometimes the problem is that you don't have the rest of the colors around it, and this is an example right here. To get the highlight to read, sometimes you have to come in with these darker values that are around it before it starts to read properly. Here now I can come in with a thicker white paint, and then this will start to pop. But it's only because the colors around it are now dark enough for it to do that. Trying to get the shape of that nostril a little better. And this is where I have to start to slow down to get these things that look like are dashed off, but they're not. And I am using a smaller brush right here. There's a little bit of highlight or light area on the outer edge of her nose here. Very subtle. Don't want to get too crazy with it. Um, I I made it much less subtle than it should be. And then that nostril only gets dark right at the edge. So if I want it to have the right turn in space, I have to pay a little more attention to that. So, and I'm going to start to um, get a little bit more precise with the edge of these glasses. It may not be right, but I want it to feel like that I just came at it fairly confidently. I can go ahead and adjust it later, but I want to try to put down that stroke kind of like I talked about the rigor earlier, just coming down with kind of one stroke. Okay, sorry, picture frozen. Love you all. So let me see if I can fix this. There's a few things that I can do. Let it. Um, let's try this. Um,